Hey folks, this is Brandt and Nick behind the camera. How you living, Nick?
I'm doing all right.
You excited about doing this video?
Sure.
Oh, as awkward as this might be, we're going to do a video about oxen. I've kept oxen for 25 years now, 26, something like that. The awkward part is I currently don't have a team of oxen. So you're going to have a video without a current team of oxen in it. We're going to patch some other videos of times I did have oxen and a whole bunch of pictures of oxen in here. And we're going to hopefully introduce you to the world of oxen and what it is being an ox teamster. So let's get started. These are some of my ox yokes. Many of my ox yokes are out on loan right now. I have some friends who are getting into it. A young Amish boy with some calves that he's breaking. He's got a few sizes of my yokes, and a friend of mine over in Chautauqua County with a pair that's wearing a nice 10-inch yoke that came from over his way. I'll get into what these sizes mean in a minute. The first thing we should talk about with oxen is what they are. And I wrote somewhere once on an article I wrote about oxen for a magazine, oxen, like heroes, are made, not born. You know, think about that for a little bit. They are made. We make them into oxen. They're not born oxen. So what we mean is there are no bull oxen and cow oxen producing calf oxen. It's not a separate breed. Oxen can be any breed of cattle. Some are more preferable than others, but they can be any breed of cattle that is trained. That's the difference, is they are trained. Otherwise, they're just dairy cows or beef cows or pet cows or something. Pet cattle. They are trained, is what makes them an ox. Now, the next thing is generally they are steers. And that is not 100%. There are a few guys, Andy Van Ord, my good buddy, down to Russell, Pennsylvania, and his dad, Howie, were bringing back working cows, actual cows. And I do tend to think cows were somewhat popular, 150 years ago and beyond, for the same reason mares are. That's half the population. But as time went on, we got that to be steers, which is obviously a castrated bull. We use the term bulls for oxen a lot, but we don't drive bulls. And again, I guarantee there's exceptions. There are people drive bulls. I've drove them until they were quite old before I castrated them or sold them or whatever I did. So it's not impossible to drive bulls. Steers are what is generally used. When we talk about oxen or working cattle, and I'll get into that term in a moment, we're talking about steers. The advantage is they grow bigger. Steers grow bigger than a bull. They're very, they're a lot less moody, obviously, than a bull or a cow. Steers also tend to be fairly consistent. They don't have as much body dimorphism or whatever the term is. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn with that word, but they look like steers. They don't tend to look like a bull as much. Kind of like you have a filly, and then as time goes on, she's a mare. It's a technical term. We have working cattle. And then after they're, 2-3 years old, there's debate on when, they're technically called oxen. But they're working cattle when they're young. So for a technical term, that's what they are. Nobody's going to scream at you if you call a pair of yearlings oxen. Not a big deal. Oxen itself is an odd word. That's the last of the terms that we have that the plural ends in en. I mean, we don't have some boxing, you know. My buddy Pipsqueak, he lives in a P.O. box. And if he builds on and puts a second P.O. box, that's a good idea, Brandt. Yeah, I might do that. He doesn't have boxing. He has 2 boxes. No, I'm calling it boxing. I'm going with it. It's cooler. Sounds more upscale. They'll like that in my HOA. Whatever, Pipsqueak. This is not about you. Yeah, whatever. It ain't about you either, boy. All right. So sorry about Pipsqueak. Anyway, oxen is the plural of ox. And it's about the last word in English that we do that with, that we end in the plural in en. Breeds of oxen. I said any breed can be an ox. Any breed of cattle. Brahma, Hereford, Holstein, Texas Longhorn, Scotch Highlanders, you know, whatever, crossbreeds. Anything can be an ox. Some are more preferable than others. Let's start with the traditional ones. In New England, you know, and I'm not in New England. I'm in the western part of New York. I'm 5 hours away from where they have a strong ox culture, getting up into Vermont and Massachusetts, and then further east. But anyway, their traditional breed is Shorthorns, milking Shorthorns. Durham, they call them up there. They're a dairy breed, but they're kind of a dual, maybe even a triple purpose dairy breed. By triple, I'd mean meat, milk, and draft power. So it's not that's less than uncommon. They're very popular up there. You can have roans, you can have red colored ones. They're very popular. They can be almost solid colored to spotted, more like a red and white Holstein. Behind them, and this is faded as the 1900s went on, Herefords were very popular up there. And Herefords faded and became less popular in the New England area. And obviously they're horned Herefords, and I'll get into the horns in a minute. Traditionally, going way back, the most historic breed and another traditional breed and a good little breed is American Milking Devon, or just plain Devons, we call them. They're a smaller breed, muscular, smaller breed, bright red color, beautiful little guys with big horns. They came from England, Devon, England, or Devonshire or something, England. I'm not an expert on them. Fast walking guys. They're very traditional for oxen. They're a fun breed. They're a really smart breed to work with. I've worked with a few. Not a great breed for a beginner because they're smart. So dairy breeds tend to work really well for oxen. The reason is they turn their feed into energy. You know, they tend to be leaner, and being overweight can be quite a problem for cattle as they get older, working cattle, oxen. So if you got a pair of straight Herefords or something, you got to watch their weight. You got to keep them exercised and worked and keep them on a diet. So dairy breeds are popular. And by dairy breeds, Brown Swiss, Ayrshire, Milk and Shorthorn. I've seen Jersey and Guernsey. They have their own issues sometimes, but they can be good oxen. Any cross within them, you know, I guess another dairy breed is the Milk and Shorthorn, the Durham. And Durham cross pretty well with Holstein. Sometimes you get a nice blue roan. Sometimes you get solid black ones, like my buddy Tom Jenkins' team he had. Dairy breed crossed with beef is really nice. That's almost my preference. So if you take Holstein, cross is good with anything, but Holstein and cross it with, I had a pair of Limousine crossed with Holstein, good team. Hereford Holstein can be good. The old brockle face up in New England and Nova Scotia. That is a horned Hereford crossed with a shorthorn. Good. Get into some of the newer breeds. So I shouldn't say newer, but newer here in America. The Chianean took over. You know, a lot of the old ox teamsters will talk about when the Chianean breed took over, and they call white cattle, and you know, the days before it was all white cattle, and people had more fun, and it was a different world before everybody drove Chianean at the polls. And it's kind of like almost here where I live in the dairy industry, the days before bulk milk, when we still had canned milk, seems to be kind of a line in the sand, but it was the good old days. And that's how the pullers talk about it. What a Chianean is a monster of a beautiful Italian breed. They are the world's biggest purebred breed of oxen, and they're an ancient breed too, traced back to the aurochs. The cows can be 6 foot tall at the shoulders. Steers can easily weigh 3,000 pounds. Big, long-legged. They're pure white with black nose. Pretty buggers. They're a little bit on the high-strung side. You know, along the lines of an Ayrshire or a Devon or something like that. They take a good teamster. Chianean, that giant breed, crosses really well on some of our breeds that are more traditional around here. Key Holstein. I had a pair of Key Holsteins that were pretty good boys, Pete and Joe. Chianean crosses well on Holstein, and they get even bigger than pure Chianean. They get some bulk from the Holstein. They can go 3,400 pounds for some of the big sweepstakes teams. It's a nice cross. They cross pretty well on brown Swiss. They bring them down a little level, and they're not quite as aggressive. I shouldn't say aggressive, but bold. They're a little slower crossed with a brown Swiss. Chianean are a popular breed these days up in New England, and Chianean crosses are. And after having owned a pair, I get why. You know, some of the beef breeds work well. They like them up in Canada. Now, they yoke with a different style in Canada. It's called a head yoke. Here in America, we have a bow yoke. These are all bow yokes that I own, even this old timer here. Now, horned breeds are far preferred. We want horned breeds. It's not a necessity. My friend Howie Van Ord, who taught me about oxen, first team he ever trained was polled Herefords. And, you know, he was working in an old county home kind of place. And one of the residents there was a blacksmith in an old logging camp back in the old days and taught Howard about oxen, and he went out and did it with a pair of polled Herefords. You know, you can have polled oxen. Now, the thing about horns with bow yokes, that's how they back up a load. If I have the team hooked to this old manure spreader and cart over here, which we do, and we're going to patch a piece or two in here, hooked to something like that. That's how they hold back going down a hill. That's how they hold the load back, a wagon, a cart, anything with wheels. The yoke rides against their horns and they hold back that way. That's also how they back a load up. When I... But... Come here. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Good boy. Whoa. Good fellers. Whoa. Oh, you're hungry. Back. Back, Pete. Back, Joe. Back. Back. You can do it. Back. 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 Come on. Back. 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 Good. You got it. Whoa. Good boys. We did have teams of oxen. We'd always back that in here at night, just like you would with horses. And they'd back up by the horns hitting the bows. Nova Scotia, and a lot of places in the world, but Nova Scotia made an absolute art form out of this, the Canadians did. They like head yokes. Head yokes are a different style. Our yokes fit on the oxen's neck with the bows going under the neck. Just real quick, I'm going to introduce the head yokes. They are precisely carved. If you could picture this yoke here, any of these yokes, let's go with this one, it's a little better. And the back of this, the front of this yoke rather, is carved with 100% precision, and it changes daily. It's carved with 100% precision to be the same shape, and every little detail is the same as the back of that oxen's horns. And then they strap them on there tight, and that's what they use to pull with in Canada. When they're little, they break them in a bow yoke. And then when they get big enough and get horns enough, they put them into their head yoke. It's an efficient way of doing things, and they have great success, and they have a high standard of teamstership up there. I mean, matched, beautiful teams that are trained, and they're really fun to watch videos. We've had some American fellas take up that tradition. Dale Parsons, Dozer Dale out in Michigan, who's a New Hampshire transplant, actually. He's gotten to the head yokes lately. Oh, I can't think of the guy's name that used to be around. Bill, big guy. He was around. He did short horns. He liked the head yoke. Nathan Hines' best team, a pair of Charlets, and they were legendary. I mean, they were, I dare say, for pulling, they were maybe all around. They might have been the best team of oxen ever breathed. I mean, they were impressive, and I can't think of their names right now. And I didn't actually know the team. I got to know Nathan after this team was gone, but Nathan put them in a head yoke for some specific reasons. Hervey Ostegoy, great guy. I got to meet Hervey when I pulled in Freiburg, Maine in the early 2000s. Hervey was a big advocate of the head yoke and did some great job with the head yoke. That's the head yoke is the style without bows. It straps to the horns. So here in my part of the world, traditionally, we use a bow yoke. This is the yoke. These are the bows. The arches, if you will, that go under the oxen's neck. Here's some that I haven't fitted yet. That's how we drive a team. That's how we power. That's how we harness their power, is the yoke. Yokes can be made out of a variety of woods. The best ones are generally a hardwood that's hard to split. Birch. They really like birch. Got a birch yoke here. Who knows what the old timer is? Hard maple here. I don't know what that old boy here is, given to me by the Historical Society from my hometown. This one is cherry here. That's been a good yoke. I got to get some work done to it. This is birch, and you can see it's maybe wasn't cut out of the log the right way. We'll get into making yokes and fitting yokes later. Right now we're just going to do a basic overview, but cut out of the log the right way, they shouldn't split. Here is another one, elm. And this is my favorite yoke. Hopefully I'll have a 12-inch team of oxen again someday. Elm is also a good yoke when you find them. The bows, the part that goes under the oxen's neck. Now these need to be precision fitted. It looks simple, but it's not. And just like horse collars, everybody who doesn't know what they're doing tends to run them way too big, too wide, and too loose. They need to be choked up pretty tight. Choked up is a bad word. They need to be brought up, pinned up is the correct word, fairly tight. But the bows should be made of hickory. Well, I say hickory. They should be made of hickory. It's the strongest and the best wood for making bows for ox yokes. The best bows have bark. If you can get up close, Nick. See that hickory? And the bark is still on it. The bark, and even on this one, Nathan Hine made these bows with logs that I got for him. The bark acts like a strap when you bend these bows and helps it hold its rigidity and its shape. You can see here on some of these we've bent through the years. Dig this ash bow here. Does not have the bark. Who knows? I can tell you it was not. It was sawed out of a piece of wood. Look at it split. Ash is okay. Ash is a distant second place to hickory for bows on yokes. It's not as strong. Somehow it just doesn't seem like as smooth and comfortable of a wood. So ash is second. Hickory is your best wood for yokes. Now back to splitting. You want to split this log the way you would a fence post. You want to split the bows out of the log. That way it leaves the bark on. As I said, it's a strap that keeps it from splintering when you bend the yoke. It also shows, and follows the true grain of the wood. When you split, baseball bats are the same way. When you split the piece out of a log, as opposed to saw it, if you can look on here, this is an ash bow made with typical Amish quality, and I say that sarcastically. You know, Amish aren't known for their high quality work and stuff. They cut corners wherever they can, and this is one of them Amish ones out of Ohio. But if you look at that grain, it's all over the place because it was sawed, and your saw will just power through that. And if you split it, you will split true with the grain. Anybody that's ever split fence post or even firewood knows you'll split a piece and it'll do this because it's following the grain. So that's what your bows are. Your bows, we can go over the pieces of a yoke. Your bows and your yoke. The part that you hook your team to the load with is called your staple. Here's a traditional staple. I'm just going to lift this, Nick. They'll have a teardrop and a ring. Again, this old timer is given to me by my hometown historical society. Here's another one. This was a auction find somewhere, an old yoke. Good pattern. I might use this to build a new yoke. Obviously, cattle aren't going to be wearing this anytime soon, but 2 rings. A lot of times you will want to run the ring over the tongue of an implement and a chain back to the hammer snapper, like where you'd hook the horses, and same as you would hook eveners. And you want 2 rings for that. So here's the yoke. A lot of my stuff is on loan right now. Here's the yoke I've been using before I sold my team. Quite simply, we got a slider, a teardrop off a skidder on here. And if I was hooking to a tongue, I'd have a ring in front of that. I believe I loaned my ring to a friend. This old timer here is what they call the slide yoke. This has 2 rings. The slide yoke is kind of an antique piece. It's more of a conversation piece. So your cattle you could adjust widths back and forth. And you could do different widths for sled tracks in the wintertime to keep your cattle on the hard packed snow, or for maybe like rows, different width rows of corn or something like that. And the slide yoke did that. Your teams would slide in and out. So we'll go over it again. Your bows, your yoke, your staple. The depth of the yoke, how deep they build this yoke, is called the belly. Some yokes have a shallow belly. I have this little guy's just more of a training yoke, but this has a shallow belly. This beauty made here by Nathan Hine has a little bit deeper belly. I was working on one here with a deeper belly. I never finished. This old pattern has a nice deep belly. Get this guy out. Nice elm yoke made by Nathan Hine. He'd cry if he could see the way I carried it these days. Moderate belly, fairly in the middle. The important part of your ox yoke by a mile is the neck seat. Just like on a horse, you need to put that collar or collar pad or whatever fits against the horse needs to be smooth and comfortable. The neck seat of your ox yoke, where their neck actually rides, needs to be smooth and comfortable. This fella here was getting some cracks in it. Nathan Hine sat down with a 6-pack of beer and he leaded it. He put all this lead on there and pounded all the little things smooth and made this neck seat smooth. That's an old-fashioned skill. My good old cherry yoke, smooth neck seat. You want that shaped and smooth. You don't want it rough. That old timer up there is probably rough, you know. It's more of a training yoke. Bob Boynton yoke here. This one was made pretty smooth. Pretty nice shape to that yoke. Kind of went to hell on me, but it's a good pattern. Nathan Hine's ox yoke. Smooth on the neck seat. And even just outside of the neck seat because they spill over a little bit. You put the yoke on your team. Whatever size. We start in teeny tiny yokes. This is a 5-inch yoke. The distance of the yoke is measured between the bows. This little guy here is a 5-incher. Most of us start our teams in 4-inch ox yokes. 4, 5, 6. Once we get in above 6, we start going by half sizes usually. I can't remember. This might be an 11.5. I've got a 10.5 on loan. Actually, 10.5 by 10 or something like that on loan to a friend of mine. This guy here is a 9 or 9.5. It's pretty close to 9.5 inches by 9. This is a 10-inch yoke. Bob Boynton's made yoke. 10, right on the money. Different size oxen, you might need a 10 on one side and a 9 on the other or something like that. Top of the oxen's neck, where this rides, needs to develop a callus, just like a working man. And that has to happen slowly. You have to harden that in with time and slow. You go up to New England and take them real working teams. The teams get hooked often. It is a good, solid, hard callus on top of their neck, just like a working man's hand. And it develops slowly. But you also have to fit your yokes specifically in order to develop that callus and to fit them well. Just briefly on ox yoke fitting. We'll get into more as time goes on. We might do a specific video on fitting. You want to pin these bows up. So this is your pin that you use to pin them. And generally we put that on the inside of the ox, of the bow, toward the middle. You want to pin them up. You know, Howie Van Ord told me an ox, when they're pulling a load, should look like a cow reaching through the fence trying to eat the second row of corn on the other side. And that's pretty accurate. It should be a lot tighter than a beginner ever thinks is comfortable. When that's fetched up and tight, that's comfortable. You don't want these bows too long. They'll bump into the brisket and bother the animal. You don't want them too wide, so the oxen shoulder bone moves with every step they take. That's why a horse collar doesn't work on an ox. And these bows have to fit inside of that flexible joint that moves with every step. So you need to fit them narrow enough that they don't bump onto that shoulder when it walks. Howie Van Ord always told me to tighten your bows up to where your team coughs a little and then start backing them down. and that's right. You rarely see people who fit a bow too narrow or too tight. They pin it up too tight. It's almost always the opposite. And it's just the same with horses. Any draft horseman will tell you, you don't see very often horses fitted with too small of a collar. It's almost always too big. On the yoke, these are called wreaths. And we use these wreaths for spacers. And we precision fit them. Sometimes we'll take out 2 spacers or something like that to get a little bit better fit for your oxen's yoke. I'll just show you a couple other quick things and then it's on to talking about training. So here's some pieces that I cut off the top of my bows. You see where that bow is? I don't like a lot sticking up off the top of the yoke. I think it looks silly to have, a foot of bow sticking up over the top of your yoke. And I can almost guarantee you're never going to have a team that wears their bows all the way down there. So if you're saving it for the next team, you don't have to worry. Yeah, should we get Nathan's big yoke out, Nick?
Sure.
I reference a few guys often when I'm talking about oxen. First one is Howie Van Ord, Russell, Pennsylvania. He taught me about oxen. We used to pull horses down to Russell. No, not Russell, south of there. Warren, Pennsylvania. Pittsfield, Pennsylvania. That's what it is. Warren County Fair, south of Warren. And while I was there, I used to enjoy watching the ox pull and learning about the oxen and just watching them, and how he taught me about oxen and got me into it. And I actually won that ox pull before. Howie made a hell of a nice program there. Howard's son, Andy, is a terrific teamster. Very, very talented teamster. And Andy's passing that on to his daughter, who's getting right there. Start your team when they're little, putting the ox yoke on like oxen. So what you do is you put the bows on top of their neck, is what I like to do. This yoke is on the ground. You pull this guy's neck over, you put this bow on your off ox. From there, all right, my off ox is wearing the yoke. Now, we're only lifting half this yoke. We lift it up, we drive the near ox under, boom. Put the yoke on him and pin it up a little. Come around front, Nick. See that little groove right there? That little notch, it's pretty groovy. That is dead center on this ox yoke, right, but direct middle between these guys. What we do, if one ox is stronger than the other or bigger than the other, just like horses, we slide this staple toward the stronger ox and away from the weaker ox, giving the weaker ox a longer lever and the stronger one a shorter lever. Pete and Joe went back and forth through the years on who was stronger, and by the time I got rid of them, they were about even. Both counterfeit. Nah, kind of. They did some good pulling for me. So this is slotted underneath. I'll put the yoke back up out against the wall so you can see that. But it's slotted underneath, and we just loosen these bolts. That allows us to slide it one way or another and compensate for a strength difference. The staple, if you look from underneath, son, has holes back and forth. Now, if I want this team to put their heads down and pull, I will put this ring further forward, causing this yoke to twist like this. Get a view from the edge. Yeah. Further forward I put this, the deeper the belly the yoke has, the more the yoke does this. If I want them to walk a little faster and this yoke to sit like this, I put it back further, or a shallower kind of belly. And that's how I adjust kind of the headset of the team, kind of what we do with bits and lines and checks on horses. That's a quick overview of the yokes. Now you notice a huge size difference, and these aren't even my smallest. That's should be a 6-inch yoke. This little guy's 6. We actually start them in a 4-inch yoke, and we go all the way up even bigger than this, but this was a 12-inch yoke. 12 by 11 and a half. Let me think about how I had that team hooked. So Pete was on the near side, the side closest to me. Had a little more rugged neck, you know, a little more bull-like. Joe was a little more steer-like. He was on the off side. And so Pete needed 12. Joe needed 11 and a half, something like that. But notice the size differences among these yokes. And one size does not fit all. And one size does not fit the same team as they're growing. We need to go back and forth with that. Nick, you're shivering. Let's go in the house where it's warm and we'll finish this video in there.
Okay.